Some breaking news. Several sources tell MS Now the House Oversight Committee believes there's been a, quote, intense White House cover-up on the Jeffrey Epstein files. The sources acknowledge that Attorney General Pam Bondi's new investigation into Epstein's ties to Democratic politicians could be, quote, weaponized, and as Democrats have been suggesting, used to redact or withhold documents.
And it further confirms that those DOJ Epstein files are going to be full of references to Donald Trump. Maybe it's benign, maybe it's his knowledge of it, maybe it's more, but there is no question that what we have seen over the last 6 months is a massive cover-up effort by Donald Trump to prevent the release of the DOJ's Epstein files, as opposed to these files from the estate.
What's up, everybody? Major Retired Richard Ojeda here. And who is Maria Farmer, and why does it matter? She was the first known victim to file a criminal complaint against Jeffrey Epstein back in 1996. And if the system had listened to her 29 years ago, countless other children might have been spared the horrific abuses that took place. And perhaps Epstein's criminal empire could have been stopped before it victimized so many innocent children and turned their lives into a living hell. And now, according to sources speaking to MS Now, formerly known as MSNBC, the House Oversight Committee believes there has been an intense White House cover-up of the Jeffrey Epstein files.
Well, I think we sort of saw the writing on the wall when this bill was rushed through this week, that sort of conveniently came out that there's new investigations after so many years of there being no investigations. And this was obviously one thing that my clients are concerned about. They'll keep full transparency and accountability under wraps for, conceivably years.
I mean, wow. Shocking, right? Who could have possibly guessed that after 30 years of ignored complaints, buried evidence, sealed documents, and a mysteriously convenient suicide in prison during the first Trump administration, we'd still be looking at yet another wall of silence?
You represent survivor Maria Farmer, who was one of the first women to ever report Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell for sex trafficking. She's now suing the government for alleged negligence over when she reported the alleged abuse and other crimes. Take a listen.
They literally just hung up and I heard nothing for 10 years. It's been an arduous journey, over 29 years of just trying to get people to hear me. Pretty much I dedicated all of my youth to this.
Does anyone honestly believe this is all just coincidence? That the first criminal complaint in 1996 was ignored, then the investigation stalled, then Epstein dies in federal custody, and now Ghislaine Maxwell is suddenly being floated in the media as a potential pardon case? But sure, no cover-up, nothing to see here, folks. Everything's totally normal. The house is on fire, but it's all good. Meanwhile, the one thing happening right in front of our eyes right now is the same thing Maria Farmer lived through for nearly 3 decades. The truth getting smothered, having your dreams smashed to pieces, and made to look like a villain for standing up for yourself and other victims of Epstein's heinous crimes. And let's be real, when Donald Trump is out here threatening Democratic lawmakers with execution for reminding soldiers they don't have to follow illegal orders, why would anyone be shocked if Pam Bondi weaponized the Justice Department?
What's interesting about Maria Farmer is she did actually complain not only to the NYPD, but to the FBI 30 years ago. We have a copy of her record from the FBI, and it's almost 90% redacted. So let's start with that, right? She makes this complaint, 1996. Jeffrey Epstein is already well known to federal law enforcement. He was one of the leading personas in the Tower Financial scandal, which until Bernie Madoff was the largest financial scandal in U.S. history. So he's a key witness in that and an unindicted co-conspirator. And then the State Department had also rented him, believe it or not, the Iranian consulate in New York City where he was living. and engaged in a lease dispute with him during this same period of time. So he wasn't a random unknown person when Maria called.
Maria Farmer wasn't alone. Virginia Giuffre wrote in her memoir that she genuinely believed she might die as a sex slave while she was trapped in Epstein's world. She described being humiliated, beaten, choked, and utterly isolated, living every day with the fear that if she spoke up, she'd be destroyed. That's the kind of terror these girls carried while the world looked the other way, while powerful men like Trump and Epstein partied, while the system protected predators instead of the children. And that's why all of this matters right now, because the cover-ups, the redactions, the missing files, they aren't just political maneuvers. They're the same continuation of the same silence that kept these survivors suffering in the dark for decades. The system that silenced them then is silencing the truth now. There is absolutely no question whatsoever that this administration, the most corrupt administration in American history, has been engaged in a massive cover-up over the last 6 months, a deliberate effort driven by Donald Trump himself to block the release of the Department of Justice's Epstein files. Because if Trump is so innocent, if he has nothing to hide, then why is he so desperate to keep these files buried? Why fight so hard to keep the public from seeing what's inside? That's what the whole conspiracy is circling around. The DOJ files Donald Trump does not want America to see. And just so we're all clear, there were actually 2 different sets of Epstein files. First, the estate files, the emails, calendars, flight logs, and private records that have already been released publicly. And second, the Department of Justice's investigative files, the government's internal reports, evidence, and case documents. Those are the files that have been heavily redacted, sealed, or withheld. 2 sets of files, and only one of them is still being kept in the dark. And let's talk about this flip-flop, because it's one for the history books. Kash Patel and Dan Bongino spent all of 2024 screaming into microphones about the Epstein files, yelling that the government was hiding everything and that the truth had to come out right now. They built their whole brand on that conspiracy. Release the files. But the second they got sworn into real power, the second they actually had access to those documents, suddenly it wasn't release the files anymore. It was selling books. These guys were seen more in DC nightclubs, partying, posing, playing celebrity than they were ever seen at work. And the mighty truth warriors of 2024 turned into a couple of bug-eyed crickets the minute responsibility came calling. And now we get to the dumbest argument in the entire Republican playbook. This idea that Biden covered up the Epstein files because they weren't released during his administration. Why didn't Democrats release them then? Simple. They legally couldn't. Those files were tied up in ongoing investigations and Republican-led committee processes that blocked their release. Biden couldn't just crack them open and dump them, even if he wanted to. And let's be honest, everybody wanted them out. And here's where the irony goes from stupid to insane. Trump's team is now trying to launch the exact same kinds of investigations against Democrats, which would tie the files up over again and delay their release for months or even years. So they're accusing Democrats of a cover-up while pushing the very mechanism that keeps the files locked away. That's a stalling tactic dressed up as outrage, a con designed to fool their gullible followers. This is the scam. And why don't we call the federal prosecutors who handled Epstein's case in Florida, the Southern District team that handed him that outrageous sweetheart deal, and ask them why a serial predator got treated like a VIP instead of a criminal? Because the truth is brutal. The key players around that deal weren't Democrats. They were Trump's people. Pam Bondi was intertwined in that world. Alex Sikoska, the U.S. attorney who approved the deal. These weren't strangers. They were part of the same circle, the same power network, the same social orbit. So if Republicans want to talk about who protected Epstein, they might want to start by looking in the mirror and at the company Donald Trump kept. And now these MAGA clowns think yelling Bill Clinton is some kind of get out of Epstein free card. It's pathetic because they've got nothing else. But here's the truth they're terrified of. Every single time they were in the hot seat, in hearings, in committees, under oath, on camera, they folded like lawn chairs. And then, like cowards cornered in their own mess, they turned around and tried to blame Democrats, scream hoax, and accuse everyone else of distraction. That is the panicked meltdown of people who know the evidence points straight at their golden idol, Donald J. Trump. So who is Maria Farmer? She's not just some woman in one case. She's the face of every survivor who was told to shut up, move on, and disappear. She represents every ordinary person who's ever been crushed under someone else's power because a billionaire decided their life was disposable. She's every human being treated like property by people so rich and insulated they stopped seeing anyone else as human at all. And in that way, we're all Maria Farmer. We're all been told to accept injustice, swallow our anger, keep our heads down while Trump and his administration protect each other. Let's call it what it is. They weren't protecting children. They weren't defending justice. They were defending themselves and Donald Trump. They weren't silencing rumors. They were silencing victims. And that's why her story matters. Because Maria Farmer shows us exactly what courage looks like when everyone else is running scared. And that is an absolute fact. Sappers clear the way, airborne all the way.